"That's him," Karen Whitmore shouted, pointing across the playground as if she had just caught a criminal. "He grabbed my granddaughter." Every sound in Maplewood Park seemed to stop at once. The squeak of swings faded beneath the rustle of oak leaves. Parents turned from picnic tables. A basketball rolled loose across the blacktop and bumped softly against a bench. Near the edge of the pond stood 14-year-old Elijah Brooks, breathing hard, one sneaker dark with mud and a torn strip of white fabric clenched in his hand. 10 feet away, a little girl in a pale summer dress sat on the grass, crying while another parent wrapped a jacket around her shoulders. Karen pushed through the gathering crowd, her expensive sunglasses perched above her forehead, her face tight with certainty. "Stay away from her," she snapped. Elijah lifted his open hand, careful not to move too quickly. "Ma'am, please listen. The ground near the water is not safe." "I saw what you did," Karen said. "You pulled her so hard you tore her dress." Someone nearby raised a phone. Then another. Elijah felt the attention settle on him like heat from an open oven. He had come to the park with a water testing kit, a notebook and a small camera for his 8th grade science project. Less than 5 minutes earlier, he had been kneeling beside the pond, recording the cloudy water near the drainage pipe. Now strangers were studying his wet jeans, his old backpack, and the piece of fabric in his hand as though those details had already decided the truth. Karen pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Elijah swallowed. His father's voice returned to him from years of careful warnings. "Do not run when someone decides to misunderstand you. Stand still. Keep your hands where they can see them. Speak clearly." Running makes frightened people believe their fear was proof. So Elijah stayed. His heart struck hard against his ribs, but his feet remained planted in the damp grass. Karen spoke into the phone with practiced urgency. "There's a suspicious black boy at Maplewood Park. He grabbed a little girl near the playground." "Yes, he's still here." Elijah looked toward the pond. The afternoon sun flashed across the surface, bright enough to hide the dark opening beneath the concrete ledge. He could still hear water rushing below it. He could still remember the second child's frightened voice before it vanished under the noise of the crowd. "Ma'am," Elijah said, louder now, "your granddaughter isn't the only child in danger." Karen stared at him, offended by his calm. "Do not try to distract me. You need to get on your knees and wait for the officers." A murmur moved through the crowd. Elijah looked at the torn cloth in his hand. He had tied part of it to a low branch beside the unstable bank, hoping someone would notice the warning. The remaining piece was still wrapped around his fingers. In the distance, a siren began to rise. Karen heard it and straightened, confidence returning to her face. Elijah heard it too, but his eyes stayed fixed on the water. Beneath the concrete, almost lost under the wind and approaching siren, came a small sound. "Help me." The voice was so faint that Elijah almost wondered whether fear had invented it. But then it came again, thin and trembling beneath the rush of water. "Please help me." Elijah took one step toward the pond. Karen moved in front of him. "Do not go anywhere," she said. "The police are coming." "There is a child under there," Elijah replied. His voice stayed controlled, but the words came faster now. "The drainage tunnel runs beneath the concrete edge. I heard him before you got here." Karen folded her arms as if his urgency were another trick. Behind her, parents whispered to one another while phones remained raised. The little girl on the grass had stopped crying. She was staring at Elijah with wide eyes, her small hands clutching the borrowed jacket. "Sophie," Karen said without looking back, "stay where you are." Sophie shook her head. "Grandma, he helped me." Karen turned sharply. "What did you say?" The girl pointed toward the pond. "We went through the broken fence. Noah wanted to see the ducks. The dirt fell down. Elijah pulled me back." Her voice cracked on the last words. Karen's certainty flickered, but only for a second. Then the siren cut through the park, growing louder as a patrol car turned onto the narrow road beside the baseball field. Elijah looked toward the tree line where the drainage channel disappeared under the walking path. He had been in the park for nearly an hour before any of this happened. He had arrived just after school, carrying the same faded blue backpack he used every day, with a water testing kit packed beside his algebra book, and a peanut butter sandwich his mother had wrapped that morning. His science teacher had assigned a project on runoff pollution, And Elijah had chosen Maplewood Pond because it sat less than 2 miles from his apartment and because no one else in his class wanted it. The park looked clean from a distance with trimmed grass, painted benches and flower beds sponsored by local businesses, but Elijah had noticed an oily film gathering near the drain after heavy rain. He wanted to understand where it came from. That was the kind of boy he was. He noticed the things people walked past. Cracks in sidewalks, loose screws on playground rails, a dog wandering without a tag, a child standing too close to deep water. Most days being observant made him useful. Today, it had made him suspicious in the eyes of strangers. The patrol car stopped beside the curb. Officer Daniel Reed stepped out, one hand resting near his radio, his expression alert but unreadable. Karen hurried toward him before he had fully closed the door. "Officer, thank goodness. That boy grabbed my granddaughter, and now he is trying to run toward the pond." Elijah did not look at her. He listened. Beneath the wind, beneath the murmurs, beneath the car engine ticking in the heat, the small voice returned. "I cannot get out." Elijah pointed toward the drainage ledge. "Officer, another child is trapped down there." Reed looked from Elijah to Karen, then toward the pond. Karen shook her head. "He is making it up." Sophie suddenly stood, the jacket slipping from her shoulders. "No, Grandma," she said. "Noah is still under the ground." The entire crowd went silent, and for the first time Karen's face lost all color. Officer Reed moved first. He crossed the grass quickly, stopping several feet from the pond where the bank dipped beneath a curtain of reeds. "Nobody follow me," he ordered. "Elijah, show me where you heard the voice." Karen opened her mouth, but Reed raised one hand without turning. "Ma'am, stay with your granddaughter." Elijah approached the edge carefully. The mud pulled at his sneaker, cold water seeping through the canvas. He pointed toward a narrow opening beneath the concrete walking path, half hidden by branches and storm debris. "The drain is about 20 feet in," he said. "I saw the boy slide past that broken section of fence. He could not climb back because the dirt gave way behind him." Reed crouched, listening. For several seconds there was only water, insects, and the nervous breathing of the crowd. Then a small voice drifted from the darkness. Officer Reed's posture changed instantly. "Noah," he called, "my name is Officer Reed. Can you hear me?" "Yes," came the answer, barely louder than a whisper. "I am cold." Reed touched his radio and requested fire rescue, medical assistance, and equipment for a confined drainage space. His voice was calm, but every word carried urgency. Elijah watched the officer study the tunnel, then glance at the clouds gathering beyond the trees. Rain had fallen that morning, and another storm could send more runoff through the pipe. "How do you know the layout?" Reed asked. Elijah unzipped the outer pocket of his backpack and removed a folded map sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve. "I downloaded the city drainage plan for my science project. The main pipe bends under the path, but there is a maintenance opening on the other side, near the baseball field." Karen stared at the map as though it belonged in someone else's hands. Reed took it and examined the marked lines. "You mapped this yourself?" "Yes, sir." Reed looked toward the far end of the park. "The rescue team can enter from the maintenance side. That may be safer than this opening." He radioed the information, repeating Elijah's directions exactly. The crowd began to shift. The phones that had been aimed at Elijah now turned toward the pond and the approaching fire engine. Sophie stood beside Karen, her fingers curled into the hem of the borrowed jacket. "I told you he saved me," she whispered. Karen did not answer. Her face remained pale, but embarrassment had begun to harden into something defensive. She stepped toward Officer Reed. "I only reported what I saw. A boy was holding part of my granddaughter's dress." Elijah's eyes moved to the strip of fabric still wrapped around his fingers. He unfolded it slowly. A smear of red marker crossed the white cotton. "I used this to mark the weak ground," he explained. "My warning tape was in my backpack, but there was not enough time." Reed followed Elijah's gaze to a low branch near the collapsed bank. Another piece of Sophie's torn dress had been tied there, fluttering above the unstable soil like a small white flag. Karen saw it too. For the first time, she looked directly at Elijah instead of through him. The fire engine stopped near the walking path, and rescue workers carried ropes and helmets toward the maintenance entrance. One firefighter paused beside Reed, listened to the directions, then looked at Elijah's map. "This saves us several minutes," he said. Several minutes can matter. The words settled over the crowd. Elijah lowered his eyes, not from shame, but because praise felt strange after accusation. Karen stood less than 10 feet away, silent now, while the same people who had watched her point at him began watching her instead. Then Officer Reed noticed a phone in Karen's hand. The screen was still open to a video. "Ma'am," he said, "I need to see everything you recorded before you called us." Karen tightened her grip. "It only shows what happened." Reed held out his hand. "Then the full recording should make that clear." Karen did not hand over the phone. She pulled it closer to her chest and glanced toward the parents gathered behind her, searching their faces for the support that had seemed automatic only minutes earlier. Officer Reed kept his hand extended. "Ma'am, a child is trapped in that drainage system, and your recording may show exactly how he entered. I need the complete video now." Karen's jaw tightened. "I stopped recording when I saw that boy pulling Sophie." "You saw Elijah pulling her away from collapsing ground," Reed replied. "That is not the same thing." The words landed quietly, but the crowd heard them. Karen looked down at her screen. Her thumb moved across it, and Elijah noticed the hesitation. She was not searching for the video. She was deciding which part to show. Sophie stepped closer, her damp hair clinging to her cheeks. "Grandma, you started recording before Noah fell." Karen looked at her sharply. Sophie lowered her voice, but she did not take the words back. "You were filming the ducks." Reed's expression hardened. "The full recording, please." After several seconds, Karen unlocked the phone and placed it in his hand. Reed opened the most recent video. The screen showed Sophie and Noah near the pond, laughing as they followed a line of ducks past a sign that read "closed for maintenance." Karen's voice could be heard from a distance, telling Sophie not to get her shoes dirty, but she did not move toward them. Then Noah slipped through a gap in the temporary fence. Sophie followed. The camera shook. Elijah appeared at the edge of the frame, dropping his backpack and running toward them. On the recording, he shouted for both children to stop. A section of damp soil shifted beneath Sophie's feet. Elijah reached her first and pulled her backward by the fabric near her shoulder. The dress tore, but Sophie landed safely on the grass. Noah disappeared beyond the edge as loose dirt slid into the drainage opening. The video ended 3 seconds later. Officer Reed lifted his eyes from the screen. "You ended the recording before checking whether the second child was safe." Karen's face flushed. "I panicked. I saw a stranger grabbing Sophie." "You saw a child rescuing her," Reed said. Elijah stood several feet away, listening to people whisper his name for a different reason now. His hands were cold despite the warm afternoon. He wanted to feel relieved, but Noah was still beneath the path, and every second seemed to press against his chest. A firefighter's voice sounded over Reed's radio. They had reached the maintenance opening but needed help locating the bend where the boy was trapped. Elijah stepped forward. "The pipe turns about 30 feet from the entrance," he said. "There is a smaller runoff channel on the left. If Noah followed the sound of water, he may be near that junction." Karen looked at him as though she could not understand why he was still helping. Reed handed the drainage map to the rescue captain, who relayed Elijah's directions to the team below. A minute passed. Then another. The park grew unnaturally still. Even the children near the playground had stopped moving. Elijah watched the dark opening and counted his breaths. At last the radio crackled. "We found him. He is conscious." The crowd released one shared breath. Sophie covered her mouth and Karen closed her eyes. Elijah did not celebrate. He simply bent down, picked up his muddy science notebook, and brushed the grass from its cover. Officer Reed returned Karen's phone. She reached for it, but he did not let go immediately. "Your assumption nearly delayed a rescue," he said. Karen stared at him. Then Reed turned toward Elijah. "And his decision to stay may have saved a child's life." The first rescue worker emerged from the maintenance opening on the far side of the path, followed by 2 others carrying Noah between them in a bright yellow safety blanket. The boy was pale and shivering, but his eyes were open. When he saw Sophie, he lifted one small hand. She ran toward him before Karen could stop her, and a paramedic gently guided her to the side so the medical team could check them both. The crowd shifted again, no longer surrounding Elijah, but opening around him. For the first time since Karen had pointed at him, there was space to breathe. He stood near the pond with mud drying on his jeans and the folded drainage map still missing from his backpack. His science notebook was bent at one corner. Water had blurred some of the numbers he had written that afternoon. He rubbed his thumb across the damp paper, trying to focus on something ordinary. Officer Reed approached him slowly. "Elijah, I need to ask you a few questions for the report, but you are not in trouble." Elijah nodded. He had heard adults say those words before in stores, school hallways, and apartment lobbies, usually after someone had already treated him as though he were. Reed seemed to notice the hesitation. "You did the right thing by staying," he added. Elijah looked toward Karen. She stood beside the paramedics with one hand on Sophie's shoulder, but her attention remained fixed on him. The confidence she had carried across the park was gone. In its place was a rigid silence, the kind people used when they were afraid that speaking would reveal too much. A man from the crowd stepped forward and lowered his phone. "I recorded everything after she called the police," he said. "I can send it to you." Another woman raised her hand. "I saw the boy pull Sophie away from the edge. I should have said something sooner." Elijah heard the apology hidden inside her statement, but it did not feel like one. Saying something sooner would have mattered. Standing quietly had helped Karen's accusation grow until it filled the whole park. Reed took their contact information, then asked Elijah to explain the sequence from the beginning. Elijah spoke carefully. He described the broken fence, the unstable soil, Sophie slipping near the bank, and Noah disappearing into the drainage channel. He explained why he tore the remaining cloth into 2 pieces and marked the dangerous area. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at Karen. Every word was plain and precise. When he finished, Reed closed his notebook. A dark sedan pulled quickly into the parking lot, and Elijah's father stepped out before the engine had fully stopped. Marcus Brooks still wore Navy medical scrubs from the urgent care clinic where he worked. His identification badge swung against his chest as he crossed the grass. "Elijah," he called. The sound of his father's voice broke something inside him that the sirens, phones, and accusations had not. Elijah's shoulders lowered. Marcus reached him and placed both hands on his arms, checking his face, his clothes, his breathing. "Are you hurt?" "No, sir." "Are you sure?" Elijah nodded, but his eyes dropped. Marcus looked toward Officer Reed, then toward Karen. "What happened here?" Reed answered before anyone else could. "Your son rescued one child, helped us locate another, and was wrongly accused while doing it." Marcus became very still. Karen took one step forward. "Mr. Brooks, I made a mistake." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked the question Elijah had been too tired to ask. "What did you see when you looked at my son?" Karen opened her mouth, but no answer came. Sophie looked up at her grandmother. "Grandma, you said he was dangerous before you even asked my name." The words were soft, almost confused. Karen's face tightened and she lowered her eyes. Around them, the park remained silent. Then Elijah finally looked at her. "Next time," he said, "ask what happened before deciding who someone is." No one moved for several seconds. The sirens had gone quiet, but their absence made the park feel even larger, filled with the softer sounds that had been buried beneath the emergency. Water slid through the drainage tunnel. Leaves turned in the warm wind. Somewhere near the playground, an empty swing creaked forward and back. Elijah stood beside his father, staring at the strip of white fabric still looped around his fingers. The cotton had dried stiff with mud. He loosened it carefully, then folded it once, as though giving his hands a task might steady everything inside him. Marcus did not rush to speak. He knew his son well enough to understand that silence was sometimes the only safe place left after too many voices had decided what you were. He rested one hand on Elijah's shoulder, firm and warm through the damp fabric of his shirt. Across the grass, paramedics helped Noah sit upright on the back step of the ambulance. A silver blanket covered his shoulders, flashing whenever the sunlight slipped through the branches. Sophie sat beside him, holding a paper cup with both hands. Every few seconds she looked toward Elijah, making sure he was still there. Karen remained a few feet behind them. Her sunglasses were gone. Without them, she looked smaller, less certain, and older than she had when she crossed the park with her phone raised. She watched Elijah fold the torn cloth again. He did not look angry. That seemed to trouble her more than anger would have. Anger might have allowed her to defend herself. His quiet left her with nowhere to hide. Officer Reed stepped away to speak with the rescue captain, leaving the family a little space. Around the pond, people slowly lowered their phones. Some turned their screens off. Others stared at the recordings they had made, seeing themselves reflected in the dark glass between moments of footage. The woman who had admitted staying silent sat down on a bench and covered her mouth with one hand. Elijah noticed, but he felt no satisfaction. He only felt tired. His father looked at the ruined science notebook. "You worked hard on that," Marcus said softly. Elijah shrugged. "I still have most of the data at home." Marcus nodded. "We can replace the notebook." Elijah looked toward the broken fence. "They need to replace that first." Marcus followed his gaze. The temporary barrier leaned toward the water, one orange warning panel half buried in the mud. It had probably been like that for days. Hundreds of people had walked past it. Elijah had been the one who stopped. A cloud moved over the sun, and the bright glare on the pond softened. For the first time that afternoon, Elijah could see clearly beneath the surface near the bank. The water was shallow there, brown with disturbed soil, carrying small leaves toward the drain. He thought about how quickly a calm place could change. One step, one assumption, one voice louder than another. Karen approached slowly, stopping several feet away. Marcus turned toward her, but Elijah remained focused on the water. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The apology she had offered earlier had sounded hurried, shaped by witnesses and uniforms. This silence felt different. Sophie rose from the ambulance step and walked toward Elijah. Karen let her pass. The girl stopped in front of him and held out her hand. Resting in her palm was the other piece of white fabric, the one he had tied to the branch as a warning. A firefighter must have returned it to her. "I think this belongs with yours," Sophie said. Elijah placed his folded piece beside it. The torn edges matched. For a moment, the two pieces looked almost whole again. Sophie held the two pieces together until the wind lifted one corner. Then Elijah closed his fingers around them so they would not separate again. Behind her, Noah's mother arrived at the park in a rush, guided by a firefighter toward the ambulance. She knelt beside her son, wrapped both arms around him, and pressed her face into his damp hair. The sight pulled the crowd's attention away for a moment, but Officer Reed was still studying Karen's phone near the patrol car. He replayed the video from the beginning, slower this time. The first few seconds showed the ducks near the pond. Then the camera shifted, catching more of the path than anyone had noticed before. A city maintenance truck stood near the baseball field. Two workers unloaded orange panels and placed one beside the damaged fence, but neither secured it. One of them received a call, pointed toward the parking lot, and both drove away. The barrier remained leaning against a tree instead of blocking the opening. Reed paused the recording and called the rescue captain over. They watched the sequence twice. The captain's expression tightened. "That area was supposed to be closed this morning," he said. "We reported the washout after the storm." Reed looked at Karen. "Did you know the pond path was restricted?" Karen hesitated. "I saw the sign, but the children only wanted to look at the ducks." Sophie stared up at her. "You told us it was fine because the city always overreacts." Karen's face changed. The words were not an accusation. Sophie said them with the plain honesty of a child repeating what she remembered. Reed turned back to the phone and continued the video. This time everyone saw the full chain of choices. Karen had watched Sophie and Noah pass the warning sign. She had called after them once, but she had not followed. When the soil shifted, Elijah had been nearly 40 feet away. He dropped his notebook, crossed the grass, and reached Sophie seconds before the bank gave way. He then moved toward the opening where Noah had disappeared, but Karen entered the frame and blocked his path. Her own recording captured Elijah pointing toward the drain again and again while she demanded that he step away from Sophie. The truth had been there from the beginning. It had simply been ignored because Karen's fear spoke louder than Elijah's warning. Reed lowered the phone. "Ma'am, this was not only a misunderstanding. You prevented him from reaching the drainage opening, and you gave emergency dispatch information that was not supported by what you recorded." Karen looked toward the ambulance, then toward the damaged fence. "I thought I was protecting my granddaughter." Elijah finally met her eyes. "You were protecting the story you had already decided was true," he said. His voice was quiet, But Karen flinched as though the words had crossed the entire park. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder again. He did not need to add anything. The rescue captain approached Elijah and returned the folded drainage map. "We entered through the maintenance access because of this," he said. "Without your directions, we would have searched the wrong side first. Noah is safe because you paid attention when everyone else was looking somewhere else." Elijah accepted the map with both hands. Karen looked down at her own phone, now dark in her palm. On its black screen, her reflection stared back at her. For the first time, she seemed to see not the frightened grandmother she believed herself to be, but the woman who had looked at a black child doing something brave and decided he must be dangerous. Karen stood with her phone lowered, the dark screen reflecting a face she no longer recognized. The crowd had grown quieter but not kinder. Silence now carried judgment, and she felt every pair of eyes that had once followed her certainty begin to measure the damage it had caused. Officer Reed stepped closer, his notebook open. "Ma'am, I need you to correct the statement you gave dispatch." Karen looked at him. "Here." Reed glanced toward Elijah, Marcus, the rescue workers, and the families gathered near the ambulance. "Here is where you made the accusation." Karen swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was smaller than before. "I reported that Elijah grabbed my granddaughter and posed a threat to children in the park." She paused, then looked at Sophie. "That was not true. He pulled her away from dangerous ground. He warned me that another child was trapped, and I did not listen." The words seemed to resist leaving her, but once they did, something in her posture changed. Her shoulders lowered. The authority she had worn like armor fell away piece by piece. "I saw what I expected to see," she continued. "I looked at him and decided he did not belong here. I treated fear like evidence." Elijah watched her without satisfaction. He had imagined this moment while she accused him. Imagined the relief of hearing her admit she was wrong. Instead, he felt the weight of how close everything had come to ending differently. If Noah's voice had been quieter, if Sophie had been too frightened to speak, if the video had started 3 seconds later, strangers might still have believed Karen. Marcus seemed to understand. He kept one hand on Elijah's shoulder, not holding him back, only reminding him that he was not standing alone. Karen stepped forward, then stopped at a respectful distance. "Elijah, I am sorry. Not because people are watching. Not because the officer asked me to correct the record. I am sorry because you were trying to save 2 children, and I made you defend your right to be here instead." Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I cannot ask you to make me feel better about what I did." Elijah glanced toward Sophie and Noah. Both children were safe now. Noah's mother sat beside him, her hand wrapped around his. The late afternoon light had turned warmer, spreading gold across the grass and catching in the silver rescue blanket. Elijah looked back at Karen. "An apology does not erase what happened," he said. "I know. But you can do something after this." Karen nodded slowly. "Tell the truth when nobody is recording you. Tell people what you assumed. And fix that fence before another child gets hurt." Karen looked toward the broken barrier, the loose panel still leaning beside the tree. "I will." Officer Reed closed his notebook. "The city will investigate the maintenance failure," he said. "Your statement and the video will be included." Karen did not argue. She turned to the parents who had gathered around her earlier. "I was wrong," she said clearly. "Elijah was not a threat. He was the reason both children were found in time." One by one, phones lowered completely. The man who had recorded the confrontation deleted a caption he had already typed. The woman from the bench approached Elijah and apologized for staying silent. Another parent admitted he had believed Karen before hearing a single word from Elijah. The apologies came awkwardly, unevenly, but Elijah listened to each one. He did not forgive them with a smile. He did not punish them with anger. He simply stood there, calm and tired, while they confronted what their silence had helped create. Then Sophie walked up and placed the 2 torn pieces of her dress into Karen's hand. "Keep them," she said. "So you remember." Karen closed her fingers around the fabric and nodded. This time, no one needed to tell her what it meant. 3 weeks later, Maplewood Park looked almost the same from a distance. The oak trees still cast long shadows across the walking path. Ducks still gathered near the pond whenever children approached with crumbs. The basketball court still echoed with sneakers and laughter. But the broken fence was gone. In its place stood a new steel barrier nearly 4 feet high, secured deep into the ground and painted dark green to match the park benches. Bright warning signs marked the drainage area, and a locked maintenance gate covered the opening beneath the concrete path. Elijah noticed every change as he rode his bicycle through the entrance on a warm Saturday afternoon. His science notebook had been replaced, though he still kept the damaged one on his desk at home. The blurred pages reminded him that useful things did not have to remain perfect to matter. His final project had grown beyond water samples and runoff charts. With permission from his teacher, he included photographs of the failed barrier, city maintenance records, and a proposal for safer drainage inspections after storms. The school district invited him to present it at a youth science forum the following month. Marcus had offered to drive him to the park that day, but Elijah chose his bicycle. He wanted the familiar route beneath his own wheels, the steady click of the chain, and the wind cooling his face as he moved past the apartment buildings and quiet neighborhood streets. Near the pond he slowed. A small bronze plaque had been installed beside the new fence. It did not mention a sponsor, a donor, or a city official. It read, "This safety barrier was installed after a young citizen chose courage, attention, and compassion." Elijah stood over the bicycle frame and read the words twice. He had not known about the plaque. His father had not mentioned it. Officer Reed had not called. It was simply there, catching the afternoon light without asking anyone to stop. Across the grass, Sophie saw him first. She waved both arms and ran toward the path, though she stopped several feet away this time and looked carefully for bicycles before crossing. Noah followed more slowly, carrying a small plastic jar filled with pond water for a school assignment of his own. Karen walked behind them. She wore simple jeans and a pale blue shirt instead of the polished clothes Elijah remembered. In one hand she carried a folder. In the other, she held the 2 pieces of torn white fabric, now sewn together along the ripped edge. She stopped beside the plaque but did not speak immediately. Sophie showed Elijah a drawing she had made of the pond, the fence, and 3 children standing safely behind it. Noah held up his sample jar and asked whether cloudy water always meant pollution. Elijah crouched beside him and explained that sometimes soil made water look dirty even when the greater danger was invisible. Karen listened. There was no phone in her hand, no sunglasses hiding her eyes. When the children moved toward a nearby picnic table, she offered Elijah the folder. Inside were copies of letters she had sent to the city council, the parks department, and the neighborhood association. Each one described what had happened without changing the truth or softening her role in it. She had also resigned as chair of the association and started helping with a community program that trained adults to respond to emergencies without making assumptions about the people involved. Elijah read only the first page before closing the folder. "You did what you said you would do," he told her. Karen nodded. "It is not enough." "No," Elijah said. "But it is a start." They stood beside the new fence as wind moved through the reeds. Sophie called Elijah over to see her drawing again. He leaned his bicycle against the bench and joined the children. Karen remained near the plaque, one hand resting over the repaired fabric. Elijah did not look back. He walked toward the pond with the sunlight warm across his shoulders, while behind him the steel barrier cast a long, unbroken shadow over the ground.